A Meeting for the Ages. Chapter 6. I spent some time looking for a place where we could live. I wanted to find a safe place, not too far from the city, where Stella could begin to get used to the land and earthly customs. We spent the 2 weeks I took on vacation settling in while I ran up a ridiculous bill at the Marriott. I felt like I needed to hide Stella. I know it sounds hypocritical. After all, it was Brenda's secret affairs that ended our marriage. But I was hiding my star girl for another reason. First of all, I wasn't moving on to anything more with her. More importantly, my marriage was already over. It just wasn't officially dissolved, and I wanted the process to be amicable. Many divorces end in bitterness and animosity. People get shit poured on them, they get beaten up, and they suffer emotionally. But this process can take place without bitterness and chaos. Brenda and I had enough dignity to interact in a civilized manner. Or maybe we just stuck to the old maxim, never let them see you sweat. Either way, neither of us gave the appearance of being in much pain. Instead, we brought it to an end that, while not perfect, suited us both. It was during one of these discussions that the prospect of other people came up. The transition to the other was inevitable. We were both reasonably attractive and heterosexual, so there would inevitably come a point when we would start down that path. Brenda said with embarrassment, "Davy, I want to talk about what we should do next. I've been asked out by a lot of men since we broke up, and I want your permission to start dating again." It wasn't as patronizing as it seemed. Obviously, we would both find other people to be with. Brenda was beautiful, and of course, I had already met my one and only. So I was glad and relieved that she had shown me enough respect to make the first move. I smiled and said, "You've been a wonderful wife, and I know you'll be one for the next lucky man. You are a stunningly attractive woman, and it would be criminal to hide your light under a bushel. So we both need to start the process of distancing ourselves from each other." She looked at me sadly. Her expression said, "I wish we were moving together instead of apart." I added softly, "We both need a fresh start." I believe that. Once the bond is broken, there is no going back. No matter how much you want to. And if you do go back, it will always be an imperfect compromise with the past. Stella gave me hope for a brighter future. I wanted Brenda to have the same hope. I was also starting to get to know my star girl. Stella may have come from a wormhole in the center of the galaxy, but her personality was like she'd flown into town on a bus from Nebraska. She was simple, happy, and warm, not an intransigent alien. Though every now and then, I had to warn her to stay out of my head. She kept tiptoeing around like a faithful golden retriever, checking, wanting to be reassured. I rented a house in Sandia Heights, which was a quick drive to the National Laboratories via Highway 556. The neighborhood was upscale, but still rural. It gave Stella the freedom to move around without worrying about close neighbors. The guy I was renting it from wanted to sell the apartment, so we made a deal. Once the divorce was finalized, I would buy it for his price. In the meantime, it was off the market. The purchase was only a month and a half away. Helping Stella adapt to my world more than made up for any remnants of regret at losing Brenda. Stella's world was a preview of Earth's future. It was catastrophically overpopulated and polluted to the point where trillions of its inhabitants were forced to exist inside polymer domes. So by necessity, their society was extremely regulated and restrictive. Everyone was assigned a role at birth, and they lived their lives doing what they were assigned. Stella herself was a console operator at the teleportation center. Consequently, she was aware of one small thing that was completely irrelevant in my world. Think about cell phones. They're ubiquitous. Everyone uses them. But few of us understand the electronics of a cell phone, a cellular network, or can create one. That's the situation Stella found herself in. She was not one of those who created and controlled the technology or directed the work. She was a simple technician. Now let's go back to the 18th century. In those days, knowing how to use a cell phone would not have done you any good. At the same time, everyone around you knew how to cope with life better than you did. This was exactly the kind of problem Stella faced. Even though she had experience with a world that was light years more advanced, she had to learn how to live here. She spent hours on the internet. In her world, they had the same general concept. But access to it was embedded in a person's mind, so all one had to do was think. Now Stella had to navigate social media and the other garbage of life online. Worse, she had to do it on a device she considered one notch above a stone tablet. When Stella learned to talk, dress, and act like a normal Earthwoman, I started taking her places like a normal couple. One night we had dinner at Antiquity, a restaurant in Albuquerque's historic square. It serves the best Chateaubriand in town. Brenda and I had dined there often in the past. No guy would feel completely safe appearing in public with a woman like Stella. She creates a sensation wherever she appears. Necks craning, people gawking like the people of the African veldt when a lion appears. Yet I wasn't worried about losing her, as she never seemed to notice other people. It was like I was glued to her like a little duckling. Tonight, she was wearing a classic black dress with a simple string of pearls. She had such perfect facial features that looking at her was like looking at a work of art. All the men and some of the women looked at her with lust as she made herself comfortable in a small, intimate booth along the wall. We were sharing a plate of carpaccio, and Stella was so enamored with the little bits of beef that she cooed and purred in my head. At that moment, a sociable voice said, "Hi, Davy. I knew I'd run into you sooner or later." I had heard that voice for 14 years, so I said cheerfully, without looking up, "Brenda, it's good to see you." She was standing next to our table with a guy who was obviously her date. She was as vivacious and beautiful as ever. I got up from the stall and said, introducing myself, "Stella, this is my ex-wife Brenda." Stella looked up and said indifferently, "It's nice to finally meet you, Brenda. Davy has only good things to say about you." It was brutal. The full force of Stella's beauty made both Brenda and her companion blink. It was like the reaction of stepping out of the shadows into bright sunlight. Brenda said, embarrassed, "This is my fiancé Tom." We shook hands. I knew who Tom Holland was. He was the largest developer in the entire Middle Rio Grande Basin and was rumored to be the popular front candidate for Senate. We both undoubtedly made a deal. I said, "It's a pleasure to meet Tom, and I wish you two nothing but happiness." This was followed by the typical smiling rejection that people perform when they can't get out of a situation fast enough. I sat down, and the two of them headed to their table. Holland cast one last disbelieving glance back. Stella said nonchalantly, "She's still sorry she lost you, and that man has a very dirty mind." Running into Brenda was a mere coincidence. We were at Antiquity for a different reason. I looked into Stella's incredible emerald eyes and said, "I told you we have an initiation ceremony where two people bind themselves to each other." She replied, "Yes, but there is no implant that guarantees fidelity." I said, "But we have a token that a woman wears to signify her fidelity." I had learned to hide my thoughts somewhat, so when I pulled out the ring, it was a surprise. I said, "We can only promise to be faithful, but I'll die before I betray that." An explosion of pure, unrequited love nearly knocked me out of the booth. She asked impatiently, "So can we get on with the very thing already?" That night was the first time we did it. I was nervous. It wasn't the performance. It was the anxiety of having one last relationship with the most important woman in your life. An additional difficulty was that this woman was not quite human and belonged to a culture in which the act was transactional rather than particularly intimate. So I wanted to take my time. We both knew what was about to happen. So we headed straight for the bedroom. I walked over to my star girl and looked into those ethereal emerald eyes. They were full of childlike innocence. I asked, "How do you start making love in your world?" She replied, "We just do it. There is no ritual." She added nervously, "I've never done this with someone I have these feelings for, and I'm afraid I'll do something wrong." That's exactly what I thought. So I said, "Come here," and very gently put my hands on her back. She timidly moved forward and pressed her whole body against me. It felt wonderful. I kissed her. She chastely kissed me back, but that was the end of it. I interrupted the kiss, and she was looking at me wide-eyed with a look as if she had never been kissed before, and she had just discovered that she liked it. I said in surprise, "You've never kissed anyone before." She answered as if it were a silly question, "What does this have to do with our business?" I realized that this was going to be a special experience. We were both standing in the middle of the room, me holding her, putting one arm around her back and the other around her waist, just above her gorgeous round ass. She started breathing a little harder. For a minute or two, I flirted with her. She made a slight sound and moved forward, pressing herself against me. Some moments from this scene I had to cut out because of YouTube's sanctions on my latest clips, so you can enjoy the full version on Patreon. It was hot. I broke the kiss and looked into her eyes again. She was looking at me completely orgiastic, with wide open eyes, lost in her own feelings. I reached out and slowly unzipped the zipper on her little black dress. I looked into her eyes again, but she was staring at me, unable to see me. I pulled the front of the dress down. She raised her girls to stun, and the sight of her shimmying was breathtaking. I always knew she had the most gorgeous stuff. Now she was free up to her waist. I looked at her. She looked intimidatingly functional. She looked at me with surprise, written all over her face, as if she had never experienced such an inspection. In a way that was true, at least for a resident of planet Earth. The exploration of the woman who was my wife, but not really my wife, continued. She stepped back. When it fell away, all I could see was perfection. Her figure resembled something out of a Renaissance sculpture, or maybe an anatomy textbook. Her stomach was perfectly shaped. Her waist was a tiny bridge connecting her spectacular upper body. I knew she possessed unearthly strength and grace. But the extreme contrast between her waist and hips was strikingly beautiful. Then I noticed the fresh natural scent of her skin and hair, which is reminiscent of bright sunlight on the most lush garden imaginable. It is the smell of health and fresh nature combined with the bouquet of earth goddess fragrances. She was also wearing a drop of killer perfume that drove me crazy. Her musky scent mixed with her natural healthy smell, an intoxicating perfume, was driving me crazy. I frantically threw off every strand, keeping her at arm's length. Then we were together again. I looked into her eyes. She was still looking at me with wide open eyes, like a bird hypnotized by a snake. It was as if she sensed something incomprehensible. I pulled her against me. She was tiny, and the sensation of having her full, rounded body, both small and muscular at the same time, next to me was indescribable. She seemed to have just discovered her depths. I looked into her eyes once more. The extraterrestrial woman was still there, staring back. She said with almost innocent sincerity, "Take me." I led her by one arm, and she lay gracefully on the bed. I lay down beside her. She looked at me with the same wide-eyed and almost innocent gaze she'd been looking at me with since we'd started this. The muscles in her belly quivered and bounced like an angry ocean surf. As the climax drew to a close, she opened her eyes. Everything that had been tentative was already out of control. She was terribly hungry. She unceremoniously turned me over and began the process as if she was going to die if she didn't quickly finish what we had just started. Then she couldn't handle our new ending and passed out colder than a mackerel. It took me a few minutes to get enough oxygen back into my body so I could think straight. Stella was still unconscious, but her insides continued to thrash frantically. The occasional full-body shudders and rapid breathing told me that she was still alive. I rolled off her and looked at her lying there with her arms outstretched. I said to myself, I can't believe this amazing woman is mine. She slowly opened her eyes and looked at me in surprise. She said, "Now I understand why people are faithful for life. Stella and I had an incredible life. She couldn't seem to get enough of it. She told me that she had never had a mating that involved emotional attachment. She told me that she didn't even realize there were emotions involved. Evenings in her world were akin to going to the gym. The entire planet used a network that was like a version of Yelp. If you wanted to engage in a similar activity, you simply picked a profile of a partner nearby. You had fun. Then you left ratings and reviews. It may have been impersonal, but it was definitely effective. Stella told me that she became as wild as she was before, because the emotional attachment makes the sensations even more intense. I told her that this is the reason why in this world it's called making love. It was as if this realization gave her a great new social breakthrough. We got married a month after the divorce. Stella didn't want to use the term married. She said it didn't reflect how she felt about me. The attachment was between her and me. It would have been, even if Stella's relatives didn't live on the other side of the galaxy. It was just the way we were. Stella insisted on the Invidian connection. That was how her homeworld was labeled in my mind. I realized why she wanted to do it that way as we went through the ceremony. We decided to spend it in a special place. So, our wedding night was spent in the REI half-dome tent. We were sitting on a rock ledge in the Face Shield, a huge cliff behind Albuquerque in the Sandia Mountains. The sun was setting over the purple expanse of desert landscape. The lights of the city began to flicker in the growing darkness below us. Stella was delighted. Perhaps her planet was more advanced. But the price for that was catastrophic overpopulation and environmental destruction. Life there was a joyless endeavor. My world was a land of wonders and new experiences, and Stella delighted in every discovery she made. My bride was dressed in a rough hiking gear, not a long white dress. We hiked up to Knife Edge Rock, on a trail that only experienced hikers and rock climbers can do. Stella handled it better than most of the regulars. One of Stella's quirks was that she could easily handle any physical challenge. I began to realize that, in addition to mind reading, my new wife had powers beyond the world. We dangled our legs over the edge. The July evening was soft and fragrant. Stella told me to lie back down on the rock. She laid down beside me, holding my hand. The sky darkened to purplish-red hues, the moon rose, and the first stars began to appear. Stella pointed to the Pleiades cluster and said softly, "Concentrate on that one." I followed her finger to the familiar cluster of stars. As I did so, I could feel her tiptoeing through my mind. She had set up a tiny mental beacon that transmitted a clear and steady signal of caring love. A powerful subconscious connection had been established between us. When she finished, she said with a blessing, "This will stay between us forever. Now we are bound." And thus we were married. It wasn't in the conventional sense, but it was as deep and real and permanent as any ceremony ever performed in the presence of a priest. It went on like that for almost a year. It was an endless series of adventures and simple pleasures. I've never been happier. But, of course, the gods like to mock me. I was coming home from work on a beautiful fall day in the desert. The sun was shining and the temperature was over 70. Soccer season was starting, and I was wondering how the Lobos would do in the Mountain West this season. I walked in from the garage whistling a happy tune, and there was my wife. She was standing in our kitchen with the most handsome man I'd ever seen. In movies, on TV, on the cover of GQ. He was wearing the same outfit that Stella wore when I first saw her. Stella looked grim. She said, "Davy, we need to talk." Those fateful words are usually the prelude to great heartache, but I could feel my little beacon giving its clear, confident signal. Nothing had happened to disrupt our connection, yet. Even so, my blood pressure spiked to a heart attack because of the look on Stella's face. She meekly replied, "This is Kal-El. He is a Groot snarl. He has come to take me to Invidia." The thought of a bounty hunter came to mind. I shouted, "Where to?" even though I knew exactly what she was talking about. It was just a reflex reaction. Kal-El was not only as handsome as a Greek god, but also as slender as himself. I wondered if there was anyone on Stella's planet who didn't possess unearthly perfection. He smirked contemptuously and said as if he were talking to a pet, "We've been looking for Stella ever since she jumped through the portal. Now that we've found her, I'm here to bring her back." I said, "This is crazy. She loves me. Why would she want to go with you?" The guy just stared at me as if he couldn't believe he was arguing with such an inferior creature. Finally, he said, "She has no right to be here. She can alert your authorities to our presence." Then he made a sound of annoyance, turned away, and said, "I'm not here to discuss this with you, Earthman. Come on, Stella. The portal will be open for a few more minutes." Stella replied angrily, "I told you, I'm not going back. I have my own life here with the man I'm devoted to. Nothing you say or do will make me leave him." Mr. E.T. said contemptuously, "You cannot be committed to a lower form of life. It is not legal. Either you come with me, or I will take you by force." As he did so, he grabbed Stella by one of her arms and started pulling her out the door. Apparently, the guy had some kind of UFO parked in our backyard. Stella tried to wrench her arm free. I had to do something. There was no way I was going to win a physical fight with this guy. But I don't do that. I said carelessly, I know you're an alien superintelligence and all that, buddy, but you'll notice that everything you've done since you walked in here has been recorded. I pointed to the tiny surveillance camera in the corner of the ceiling and said, if you're kidnapping Stella because your Invidian masters don't want her to reveal the presence of your race, how do you think they'll react when they find you proving that extraterrestrial life does exist via TMZ and Fox News? I laughed, trying to sound more confident than I actually felt, and added, we have this thing called the internet. It's out of your league, but I can assure you that you will become a worldwide viral sensation if you don't get in your flying saucer and take a truck back to where you came from. Mr. Eat stopped and looked at the camera. He looked puzzled. Apparently, superminds aren't that observant. Or maybe he underestimated us Earthlings. I knew exactly what he was thinking. I said informatively, you're finished. There is nothing here that can be erased. You'll never find the recording. It's being streamed to a cloud account, so smile. The alien lowered Stella's hand and turned to me. He said, you won't be able to report this if you get vaporized. At that moment, he pulled out what looked like a fountain pen. I didn't seriously think he was going to write me a check. I wasn't scared. I was inspired. I thought, at least I will die protecting the woman I love. Then I heard a resounding gong. The light went out in Mr. E.T.'s eyes, and he collapsed as if his strings had been cut. Stella stood behind him, posing like Serena Williams serving a forehand on center court. In both hands, she held an old-fashioned cast-iron skillet. It was a very effective low-tech solution to a high-tech problem. The little beacon in my head flashed brightly. It was Stella, soaring with joy. She said, I was always afraid someone would come after me. I think we're safe at last. Of course, this presented us with a new problem. We had to get rid of the body. There are a lot of ghost towns around Albuquerque. The closest one was called Golden. In the 19th century, Golden was the center of gold mining in all of Albuquerque, hence the name. It had a Catholic church, saloons, businesses, a school, and even a stock exchange. But the gold ran out at the end of the century, and by the 1920s, Golden had become a ghost town. Their old cemetery is next to a restored church built in 1830. Stella and I drove 30 miles from our house, with Kalel wearing a seatbelt in the back seat, just like in Weekend at Bernie's. As we expected, the area was completely deserted. I parked and left the headlights on. We dragged the body through the brittle desert shrubbery to an area of old graves. I knew what urban legends I was spreading by burying an alien in a ghost town. The soil was mostly sandy, so it was easy to dig. It's not like they had this guy's fingerprints. He's gonna be a mysterious unknown, assuming, of course, they ever find him. We put him in the hole and covered him up. Then we went back to the truck. It was already 10 o'clock when we finished our creepy business. I plopped down in the chair next to the fireplace. Stella was sitting serenely in her usual position on the sofa. I asked, do you want to talk about it? After all, she had just killed a man. She looked at me calmly and said, we have nothing to talk about. I could never leave you. So I did what had to be done. I dug further. Why? Maybe because I'm an insecure wuss. But then again, Stella had just killed someone. I asked, how do you feel? Okay, snowflake. That's enough. She said simply, you're the person I'm loyal to, and Kalel was going to turn you into a cloud of composite particles. I couldn't let that happen. I promised to be your life's companion, to support you in everything. I meant it. Everything that mattered was expressed in one simple statement. Married people take care of each other. That's invariable, no matter what planet you're from. This beautiful woman may have come out of a wormhole from another part of the galaxy, but she understood love and loyalty. Time passed and we were getting older. Stella was fascinated by aging. She told me that the causes of aging were well understood, and if there was knowledge, it could be managed. On Earth, we call it epigenetics. We've even started doing serious research on manipulating telomeres and genes. But the people on Stella's world perfected the process centuries ago. It was like visiting a tanning salon. Each citizen went through a life cycle procedure. You lay down in a special device. It would scan you and remove any defects. After that, you could proceed to the next cycle. Since these cycles were similar to Earth's life expectancy, citizens in Stella's world lived very long lives, always in perfect physical health. Now we were both feeling the weight of our happy years together. Stella's outrageous beauty had kept her from being classically ruined by time. In fact, she was beautiful at any age. I just got older. My commitment to fitness helped me maintain my relative health. But there was no escaping the dreaded diagnosis. It was draining my vitality, and Stella was distraught. When the situation became unbearable, my wife loaded me into our truck, and we headed south. When she parked near where we first met, there was an amazing starry sky in the desert. Then we began the agonizing trek through the Jornada del Muerto to the obelisk. 4 miles is a long way for a nearly dead person, and it took hours. Stella supported me every step of the way, putting her arm around my shoulder like a warrior wounded by life. The 12-foot-tall monument was visible as a black spot against the star-studded sky. The desert was silent. A light wind blew from the west. I was sweating and panting from the effort. Stella let go of my hand and leaned me lovingly against the black lava of the obelisk. She was wearing the suit and the device on her arm that she had been wearing when I first met her. She walked a few yards past the obelisk and did something with the device. The air began to shimmer, and the stars in that part of the sky disappeared, replaced by a miniature galaxy. She came back to me and put my hand on her shoulder and helped me into the seat. She said, "We will make you well again, my love." Epilogue. It was deep night at the site of Trinity. It was dark and lonely, as it could only be in the desert. Then a flicker appeared, growing into a vague shape like a galactic wheel. The shimmer parted like a curtain, and 2 people walked through it. Then it disappeared. The man was trim and youthful-looking. The woman was a perfectly splendid specimen of femininity. For several long minutes, they stood together, gazing thoughtfully at the night sky. Then they turned and walked hand in hand down the path toward the distant road. She said in the dubious tone of a long-married wife, "Are you sure the truck will start, honey?" He replied in the voice of the archetypally patient husband, "Of course it will start, my love. It's only been a day. Now let's have breakfast. We have a whole life ahead of us." Viewers, part 6 of our journey is filled with reflections on how little control we have over our hearts and the impossibility of hiding real feelings. In this episode, we see Dave bitterly realize the irrevocability of his decision to break up with Brenda, while his new connection with Stella turns into something deeper. Stella, kind and sincere, who initially appeared alien to this world, proves to be closer and more understandable with each passing day. She not only brings a fresh stream of perception into Dave's life, but also becomes his support and source of faith in the future. Dave and Brenda's parting in an elegant restaurant is a moment full of bitterness and simultaneous recognition of the changes that have inevitably come to their lives. What follows is Dave's exciting encounter with the past, in the form of Brenda and her new companion, opening the door to new beginnings and possibilities for both of them. And so, when a stranger comes into Dave's life, everything he has known and valued comes crashing down. Stella, displaying not only outward perfection, but also incredible courage and loyalty, becomes his protector. Stay tuned for further journeys into the uncharted corners of the universe of love and devotion. The full uncensored version of Chapter 6 is available now on our Patreon. Join us so you don't miss a single step of this amazing journey.